So the topic of this video is how everybody is crazy. And I've had these thoughts for a while and I've kind of talked about them in other videos, but I don't know if I described them very well. And this PowerPoint is actually something I made for my English class. I'm actually an English teacher in China right now. Although I think I'm going to leave. I've just told them today I'm going to leave. But anyway, I thought if I could describe these thoughts to people who aren't even native speakers of English, then I could probably teach them to native speakers. So here it'll go. And I never actually showed this to my students, by the way. I thought perhaps it wasn't appropriate, although I think I described it well enough. And I don't have a script, but the PowerPoint will help me. The first point is that all animals are happy machines, and that includes people. And that means we try to get good things and avoid bad things. People are special because we can lie to ourselves in order to make ourselves feel happy. It is not going. Okay. And the next slides are about irrational emotions that we have. Several of them come from lying to ourselves, and a couple come from other sources. Actually, they aren't directly related to lying to yourself. But I've just included everything that seems to me to be irrational emotions in the slides. And the most important irrational belief is that we believe we are important. People want to believe that their lives are important. I suppose every animal probably would if they could have abstract thoughts. Most animals can't have thoughts beyond taking care of their immediate physical needs. But I'm sure if they could, then they would want to believe that they were also very important, and they would lie to themselves just like people do. Oh, come on, It's so slow. I don't know why I'm doing that. But anyway, I've never seen any convincing proof that our lives actually are important. Basically, the sun doesn't shine when you're happy, and the rain doesn't fall when you're sad. And I've not seen any other law of physics which seems to care about our feelings either. I'm not aware of anything that happens in nature because somebody wants it to happen. As far as I can tell, nature holds a man, a fly, and a pebble at equal value, and that we are all subject to the same laws. And because we want to feel important about ourselves, but there isn't actually any reason to think this, we are proud. And pride is when you invent reasons to feel good about yourself. And one way you can be proud is to imagine that qualities you have make you better than other people. And I think I have examples here. Yes, beautiful women like to imagine that being beautiful makes them more important than other people. And rich people like to believe that being rich makes them more important than other people. And I suppose that does make their lives easier because most people do care about beautiful women and they do care about money. So I suppose that does make their lives easier. But 100 years from now we'll all be dead and no one will care. Your life will be as meaningful as the life of a mosquito in 100 years. Most likely. Unless you're one of those very special people who make it into the history textbooks. And proud people, of course, always become angry if you don't agree that they're as important as they think they are. And another way people are proud is that they imagine they have positive qualities which they don't actually have. And I also have examples of this. So a person with average intelligence might want to imagine that he's very smart. Or maybe even someone who really is very smart wants to imagine that he's even smarter than he is. I used to do this. So he might think of ways of proving to himself that he's smarter than other people. I think that's why a lot of guys play video games. It's not the only reason you play video games, but I think that's a major reason why. That's probably a cause of rage quitting and trash talk and things like that. Although I always did trash talk because I thought it was funny. But anyway, yeah, people who want to believe that they're smarter than others, they will call other people stupid. And he'll be happy if he thinks other people think that he's smart. And being smart isn't the only thing. Like, this could also happen with being pretty. That's why women spend lots of time doing makeup in the mirror, because they want to look prettier than they are, even though makeup really doesn't make you look prettier most of the time. It just puts funny colors on your face and things like that, yeah. And I have another example that poor people often buy expensive things in order to look rich. So everyone is trying to imagine that they're better than they are, and even when they do have an accurate understanding of some good thing that they actually have, they think that there's some law of nature that makes them better than everyone else. Like, of course, a pretty person will think being pretty is the most important thing, and a smart person will think being smart is the most important thing. A physically fit person will think that's the most important thing. Everybody thinks whatever they are is the best. Oh yes, and being offended. I have these words here because I'm trying to explain what being offended means to someone who's not a native English speaker. I thought this picture was useful. So basically you should know what being offended is if you're a native English speaker. You usually become offended when someone says or does something that you don't like, and it's similar to anger. And I believe you feel offended when you hate facts, and I'll demonstrate that on the next slide. Yeah, so here are some thought experiments to prove that people are offended by facts and not falsehoods. I don't think anybody would be offended if I said that 1 + 1 = 3. And I don't think someone who is very beautiful would be offended if someone called her ugly. And I don't think someone who is very smart would be offended if someone called him stupid. Like, they know that they're beautiful and they're smart, and they don't care if you don't agree. So because of those thought experiments and other thoughts I've had, I can imagine 2 reasons why a person can become offended. One is that he wants to believe that something is true, but he is afraid that it isn't true. Maybe he even secretly knows that it isn't true, and therefore he will become angry if someone says that it isn't true. And the second reason is he doesn't believe that people with different opinions than him should be able to speak, or maybe he doesn't even think they should exist. And therefore it is the existence of people who don't think like him which offends him. And I suppose that's the existence of other people, I suppose, is another kind of fact. Oh yes, and this is common too. Judging other people comes from pride. And the usual reason is that the usual way of making yourself feel better is to compare yourself to other people. And in order to look good compared to other people, they have to look worse. And I think that's pretty much the main reason. Because how else are you going to feel special? Obviously the rocks and the rain and the trees don't care about you. They don't care how smart you are, how much money you have. Yeah, so if you want to imagine ways of feeling good about yourself, you have to imagine how you're better than other people. And I think that's why everybody is so judgmental. Dogs don't judge other people. They get hurt feelings, but they don't have the imagination necessary to imagine that some dog is worse than he really is. Yes. And many of the negative thoughts people have about other people are complete fantasy. And even if they are real, there's really no reason to think about them most of the time. Oh yes, and I have noticed, I forgot I put that in the slide. I have noticed that group identity is usually based around hating a common enemy. I can give examples. Since Democrats and Republicans basically do the same things when they get into office, that means in practice Democrats are anti-Republican and Republicans are anti-Democrat, but they aren't positively for anything. And some of the Christian groups in the United States seem to be basically anti-gay, and the feminists are basically anti-men. and everything like that. Almost any social group you can name are defined against somebody. There are a few groups who are different. I like a certain type of traditional Christian because they are positively for their God and for their country, for their nation, however they think that is. I like those kinds of people. But ironically, I think most people think that those types of people are hateful, even though they're really the only types of people who aren't. Those people who are positively for their God or for their country, for their people, however they think of that, to be positively for something, that's the only type that really isn't hateful, because their identity doesn't depend on the existence of some other group. And worry is when you think a lot about something you can't control. That's basically the definition of worry, if you think about it. And therefore, by definition, worry wastes your time and energy. And Jesus had some good quotes on worry. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And he said a whole bunch of other stuff, but the conclusion that's important is, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble on its own. And I don't think that literally means don't think about what's going to happen tomorrow. In biblical times, they use days to mean time periods. So I think what he actually means, because this is usually how they use the word day in the Bible, is worry about things that will happen either right now or in the immediate future, and don't worry about things that may or may not happen a long time from now. I think that's a better translation. Because of course you need to worry about very simple things that will happen the next day. But then it's not really worrying, because if you can do something about it, you can do it, and then that's not worrying. And I think we worry because we don't want to accept that sometimes bad things have to happen. If we could just accept that sometimes, or even most of the time, or maybe even all the time if you're unlucky, you can't have what you want. And if you can accept that, then you never need to worry about anything. And ambivalence, this is actually something that dogs can have. Almost any thinking animal can be ambivalent. It just means that you have mixed feelings about something. And an example is a relationship with someone who is nice to you sometimes and who's sometimes mean to you. So you'll have mixed feelings about that person. I've had that recently. And another example might be if you're a kid at school and it's important to you both to be nice and to be popular, but all the popular kids in your school are mean. That's usually how it is, the popular kids are mean. Because you become popular by hating other people skillfully, by making fun of the outs. That's usually how it works. So if you care about being nice, you can't care about being popular. Otherwise you'll have ambivalent feelings. And the way to deal with ambivalence is to accept that you can't get everything that you want. So you just have to prioritize. This is something people can actually do better than animals. Animals have limited thinking capacity, so when they're ambivalent about something, they might be indecisive forever. A human can use his brain and figure out and decide he's not going to care about A and he's going to care about B. I did that recently. I ended that relationship with that person who was very nice to me in some ways, and I couldn't figure out how to make it work in other ways. Anyway, let's do the next one. Oh yes, and negative feelings about yourself. People have these a lot. It is actually not possible to become a better person without sometimes having bad feelings about yourself. And the reason is that, what is the reason? There's a very good reason for it. How are you supposed to get better if you won't admit that you're doing something badly? You have to think, I'm doing something badly, before you can fix it. But I believe all of your emotions should be directed for a particular purpose, and you should use the emotion to energetically pursue the purpose, and then when the purpose is accomplished, or if it becomes impossible, you just need to give up on that emotion, and then you'll be happy. If you're able to change to become better, then you should do that. And after you make the change, there's no reason to feel bad. So like if you're lazy or mean or do something else you don't like, being angry at yourself will help you change. So anger at yourself in those moments is a good thing. But there's no reason to be angry anymore once you've addressed the problem, once you've developed better habits. And if you're not able to change to become better, then feeling bad about yourself is useless. So if, for example, you're short or ugly or you have no money or talents, you can't help being short or ugly ever. And it takes time to acquire money and talents, and maybe a bit of luck too. And so either you can't change those things or it takes some time. And feeling bad about yourself in these situations is useless. And so confidence for most people basically is identical to pride. A confident person, the way most people think about it, is a person who thinks he's a great person. He thinks of all these ways how he's great, and like other people should love him. I don't think that's actually an honest or secure way of thinking about yourself. I think I'll address this in the next slides. To be a really complete person, you have to be comfortable with the bad parts of yourself too. You have to say, I'm a piece of shit, and I can't help it, and that's okay. Maybe a piece of shit. Maybe saying you're a piece of shit totally is a bit of an exaggeration. But usually when people start thinking bad about themselves for the first time, they exaggerate a bit. And I suppose that's okay. Oh yes, and people care about this a lot in China. Saving face. People in the United States also do it, but I think they care less about it than Chinese people. And as I understand it, saving face means to make something look better than it really is. But in the real world, both good and bad things happen. So as far as I can tell, whenever you think about face, you're automatically thinking about how to be dishonest, how to make something that actually is bad, at least by your standards, appear to be good. Actually, nature doesn't have any concept of good or bad. Good or bad always comes from the ideas that individual animals have. Even animals have simple ideas of good and bad. Good is something they like, probably pleasure, and bad is something they don't like, probably pain. And humans have more sophisticated ideas of good and bad, but they don't exist outside of our own heads. But according to some system that's important to you, of good and bad, some situation according to that system you have is good or bad. And it's dishonest to try to imagine it differently, and that's what face is. And I think face is basically almost the same thing as FE, if you know the MBTI. Extroverted feeling. I suppose it is important for your survival to care about what other people are thinking, since we are social animals. But thinking that it's actually a real thing, that to me seems very dishonest. Oh, and politeness, this is another topic. Politeness is when you care about someone's disabilities. And politeness is therefore not necessary for healthy and fully developed people. As an example, it is polite to give up a seat to an old person because they're weak and get tired easily. And it's polite for men to carry heavy things for women because women are weaker than men. And it is polite to say simple things to children and mentally disabled adults because they do not understand as well as normal adults. And it's polite to say nice things instead of truthful things to people because most people hate facts. And the first bullet point has to do with a physical disability. The first two, actually, I guess. Compared to, I guess women, you could consider them disabled compared to men, even though that's completely normal. A completely normal woman would be a physically handicapped man if her gender were to change. And politeness to children and mental retards, in that example where you explain things simpler to them, that's politeness for mental disabilities. And white lies and small talk and saving face and all of euphemisms and all that other stuff, That's politeness for emotional disability, people who can't handle facts, which is most people. And humility is the opposite of pride. This is the next topic. Humility comes from not caring about yourself first. Yes, pride is when you think you are special just because you're you. There's no reason for it. You are you, therefore you're special. I'll give some examples of how you can be humble. Yes, I just said this. Humility is not thinking you're special. It comes from caring about things outside of yourself first. And there are many ways of being humble. Religious people can be very humble if they care about God more than their own feelings. Although most people in the United States, they do it the other way. They think of God as a way of making themselves feel good. But a really devout person actually thinks in the other way, that God is like the lawgiver and center, the source of purpose. And when God is the source of your purpose, you actually inconvenience yourself a great deal in order to try to please Him. And that is a humble thing. Or even if you are a secular person, you can also be humble if you think that a person is only good if he is virtuous. And then your ideas of virtue are probably a bit arbitrary because you probably made them up yourself. But still, in a certain sense, that is humility because you are valuing things outside of yourself as being superior to yourself. And this is probably the most common, people who love their family members a lot, who care about their family members' needs more than their own. I think that's actually kind of what it means to be a family. At least socially or spiritually or whatever, not just by blood relation, because you can have blood relations you don't care anything about. But in a functioning family, it seems like what it means to be a family is to care about somebody else's needs just like your own. And that is humility with respect to that person. And basically, humility is good because if you want to believe that you are special, then you will imagine reasons to explain to yourself why you are special. And if you're humble, that means you don't want to be special, then you won't do that. And there are several good things that come from humility. You cannot be honest without humility. A proud person cannot understand anything which makes him look bad. And he probably won't understand anything that makes him feel bad either. I could provide many examples, but I will not because it would probably offend most of my viewers. The viewers can just notice the next time they get offended and then realize probably what they're offended at is probably true. And they might want to change the way they think about things if they want to be honest. And you can't love properly without humility because a proud person only cares about others as a way of helping himself. Although as a caveat, a part of me really hates suicidal altruism because good behavior only comes from people who choose to be good. And if the people who choose to be good hurt themselves, then there's not going to be any more good behavior anymore. I really wish people who really wanted to be good, who had those good temperaments, they would think logically about the consequences of their actions and be more selective about who they are nice to. Because I know some people in the world really do want to be nice. It makes them feel good. But if you're nice to everyone and they're mean to you, then that's going to hurt you. And then maybe you won't have very many children, and then there will be fewer good people. But anyway, there's kind of a different topic. Most proud people can only love other people as a way of loving themselves. And a humble person can actually love selflessly or close to selflessly. And you can't be peaceful without humility because proud people imagine things which aren't true to make themselves feel good, and when those things don't happen, it hurts them. The more humble you become, the more you don't care when bad things happen to you. And then you will be peaceful. And actually, or maybe we'll discuss this more later, but I've made a great deal of progress towards humility, and I still feel pain. It doesn't affect physical pain at all, but it does reduce emotional pain a great deal. And when I do feel emotional pain, although I feel it, There's something inside of me deeper that doesn't move. And that didn't used to happen. Oh, and this is a cool quote. It's from a children's cartoon, but I still really like it. Pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame. And I believe feeling peaceful in unpleasant circumstances is the best proof of being humble. But wanting to feel peaceful, however, will not make you more humble. Peacefulness is like a result rather than a cause. And in order to become humble, you must humiliate yourself. That doesn't mean you have to humiliate yourself in front of other people, but you have to feel humiliated somehow, even if it's just to yourself. And the great thing about being humiliated is that by being humiliated, you become humble, and then you'll never get hurt by that thing again. Like, for instance, if you're proud because you think you're really smart and you don't make mistakes, and you realize you've made some really stupid mistakes. Like maybe you said some really stupid things in front of the whole class, or maybe in front of everybody at work. If you deny that you did the stupid thing and try to think to yourself how you really did okay or how it was other people's fault, then that'll just increase your pride and you'll get even more upset the next time it happens. But if you accept it and realize, oh, I really am stupid, I really do stupid things sometimes, I'm really not good at certain things, then the next time you do a stupid thing, it won't even be a surprise and you won't care. It'll just be a fact. And maybe it won't even happen because you'll be aware of it before it happens, and maybe you'll ask for help, or maybe you'll try to avoid that situation where you know you're bad at it. And if you can't avoid it, you'll be ready for it. Oh yes, and we're up to the summary now. Actually, I have a few more slides after this, but so this video, the ending will be kind of strange because this is not actually the end of the video, but this is the main summary. I have some other random points after this. But anyway, the summary is that all humans are insane. They're born insane. But animals are not insane because they're too stupid to lie to themselves. They aren't imaginative enough to think of how they are special. All people are born insane because they're able to lie to themselves in order to improve their emotional state. And a person who lies to himself a lot in order to feel better is proud. And pride always hurts in the long run because nature does not care about your feelings. And you usually have to try on purpose to be saner. Actually, suffering is almost always the way it happens. You have to be willing to accept and learn from suffering. And like I just said, it's painful to try to become saner. And humility is a saner state of being than pride. And I don't know whether it's possible for a person to achieve perfect humility. Ah, yes. The next slides are more details about how your emotions actually work. So these are the types of feelings I can think of: instincts, desires or sensations, and emotion. And the input, I think the table should be easy enough to understand. The input of an instinct is uncontrolled. It comes from like a sensation probably. And the output is also uncontrolled. And I used the example that if dust gets in your eye, you will blink. And you'll notice that you blinked after you blinked. It's not a thinking thing that happens. And you have many instincts, but I think that's probably enough for you to understand it. A desire, hunger is an example of a desire, and so is lust. Well, I suppose lust also has an emotional component, and I suppose the physical processes of sex have instinctual components because you don't decide when you ejaculate and things like that. But there is a desire component of lust. But anyway, I'll just use hunger as an example. You're hungry when your body needs food, so you can't control. You can control it indirectly by how much you eat, but given a certain state of your body, you cannot control the feeling of hunger that comes from that. But you can decide what you put in your mouth. And in a similar way, you can't control feeling lustful, but you can control what you decide to do about it. And you can't control being sleepy, but you can decide whether you'll lay down, up until a certain point where you get so tired that you just fall over while you're walking. But that takes a long time. And emotions are complicated. The input to emotions actually is somewhat controllable, but most people don't try to do it. And it is controllable because it requires a thinking process. An instinct and a desire come from bodily sensations, and you can't control those. But an emotion comes from a thinking process. So for example, when you become angry at someone, that probably happened because you care about something and you understood that someone tried to hurt that thing on purpose. That's usually how you feel angry. And when you become angry at someone, you probably want to hurt him, but you can decide to do something different than what you want. That's the output. Lots of people try to control the output of their emotions, but very few actually try to control the input. And so like if you feel like you want to murder someone, you can smile at him and say hi, and that's controlling the output. But you can also tell yourself things like he didn't do it on purpose, or it really isn't that important. And those thoughts can actually control the input of the emotion, and that will actually change the emotion you feel. Of course, depending on how skillfully you're able to do this, you might have limited success, but you can actually change the emotions you feel by very simple thoughts like that. And there's more on emotion. Yes, emotions actually are not the core of your being. There's something deeper, and those are your values. And your values are basically just what is important to you. And there are many things that are important to you. Like all animals, for instance, they think pleasure is good and pain is bad. Those are values. Another example, most people care about money. It's not that bad to care about money, at least to some extent, because you need it to buy rent and food and things. But anyway, if money is important to you, you'll probably feel disappointed if you earn less money than expected, or sad if you lose money, or angry if someone takes money from you. So caring about money is actually the root of all those feelings. And that means you cannot directly feel what's important to you. You can only feel an emotion when something happens, or if you imagine that something happens. So an emotion is not actually your value. An emotion happens when you have a value plus some thought that is related to that value. And so that fact or imagined fact plus the value produces the emotion. And so this is the chain of behavior. You have your values, that's basically the core of your being, the core of your psychology. Your emotions, which come from your thoughts plus your values. And then your emotions typically drive your thoughts. I suppose it's a little bit more complicated than this because your thoughts also drive your emotions a little bit. I suppose there's a kind of a circular thing that happens. But your emotions definitely drive your thoughts. The purely rational part of your brain, what you could call your thoughts, it actually, at least for me, it seems to be very efficient and good. It doesn't make mistakes, at least when I give it right inputs. When it does foolish things, it's because I choose to think about something that's foolish. And I do that because I'm emotional. Yes, when you're angry at someone, it is natural for you to try to think of ways of hurting that person. If you're sad, it's natural to try to think of ways of avoiding that same thing happening again. If you're happy, it's natural to think about how you can do that again. And it's that way with every emotion. Every emotion encourages you to have certain types of thoughts. And when you accept a certain type of thought and decide to act on it, then that becomes your action. So I suppose it is a little bit more complicated than this, but if you want to make it very simple, this is how it happens. Your values plus things that happen and how you interpret them produce your emotions. And then your emotions drive most of your thoughts, and then the thoughts you choose to accept, they drive your actions. And actually, like I said before, you can actually reject emotions too if you reject thoughts. So yes, it is a little bit more complicated than this. And so the best way to change yourself is to think about what's important to you. Trying to stop bad thoughts will actually improve your actions more than trying to stop bad actions. Trying to stop bad emotions will actually cut out half the bad thoughts. and trying to change your core values, that will make the biggest difference for the least amount of effort. I know because I've done it. And the last slides will talk a little bit more about different types of thoughts in different animals. This is just to demonstrate how human thoughts are different than the thoughts of other animals. I suppose I could talk first about an alligator or like a lizard, some kind of reptile brain. They don't really have very sophisticated thought processes. They're basically habitual animals, I suppose. I don't think they can learn very much. They have very simple thoughts, yes. I don't think they have much capacity to learn or to think. They definitely have emotions, though, I'm pretty sure. I think an alligator can get angry or afraid. So they have very, very simple thoughts, and I think they have a very, very limited capacity to learn anything. It's basically all instincts and things that they might develop out of habit, I guess. And a dog is a level up from an alligator. They can actually think about cause and effect in a very simple way, in a way an alligator cannot. And I like to use the example, I'm pretty sure if a dog sees 2 rabbits go into a hole, and then he sees 1 rabbit go out of the hole, I'm pretty sure he can figure out that there's still 1 rabbit in the hole. And I think that's like the most complicated thought a dog can have. And that's important because it means the dog can use sensory information to make educated guesses about things that he cannot see. That is kind of close to an abstract thought, but I think it's not quite there. It is a concrete thought where he is making sensory conclusions that he cannot see from sensory information that he can see. I think that is like one-step logical processes, guessing about things he can't see from things that he can see. I think that is the simplest kind of thought a dog can have, the most complicated kind of thought a dog can have, I'm fairly certain. At least from my experience with dogs. I'm aware that some crows are very intelligent. I've looked up some crows and intelligence tests on YouTube. I thought they were cool. One test was that they put the crow in a cage with a couple of smaller cages inside of it. There was 1 cage with meat and 1 cage with a long stick, and then there was a short stick outside of both cages. And the short stick was long enough to reach the long stick, but it wasn't long enough to reach the meat. So the crow had to pick up the short stick, grab the long stick with the short stick, and then use the long stick to grab the meat. And the crow, the first time they put the crow in the cage, he went in the cage, looked at everything in the cage for a minute, and then he did exactly what I just said on his first try, without any mistakes. So that means there was no trial and error. He made a plan and he did the plan. And that is a 2-step logical process. And tool use. He didn't just make a guess about how he could do something with something that was immediately apparent. He had to imagine something that did not exist. And the thing that didn't exist yet was that he had the long stick. He had to imagine, if I have the long stick, which I don't have right now, then I can get the meat. I'm pretty sure a dog cannot do that. And I think this is the simplest type of abstract thought, or it's on the edge of abstract thought, I think, where I believe abstract thought is when you imagine something that is not immediately connected to sensory information. So for instance, a concrete thought is that flame and heat go together. If you see smoke, that probably means there's a fire, and that probably means it's hot. A dog can do that, and he can run away from the smoke, because dogs don't usually like fire. I don't know if they think that much about it, but I'm pretty sure if they wanted to, they could figure that fire is hot and I'll get hurt. But yes, the crow is even more impressive in that he can imagine something which doesn't exist in order to get something that he wants, to make real things happen. And that is getting very close to abstract thought, if it is not already, I think. But humans, of course, our abstract thoughts can go way beyond that. And of course there are other smart animals like dolphins and chimpanzees, but I just used the crow as an example because I thought that experiment showed very clearly that a very interesting thing that the crow could imagine something which didn't exist. And I think actually being able to imagine things that don't exist, that is necessary for abstract thought. Because when you're thinking abstractly, it is not connected to any sensory information. And that means necessarily imagining things which don't exist, at least in the material world. And of course humans can do that. We have language, we have math, we have technology and everything that comes from language and math. And that is where we have pride, because we can imagine things that don't exist. Our very problem-solving ability, which comes from abstract thought, it allows us to imagine things that don't exist. And that causes a problem because our basic emotional makeup is the same as every other animal. We're basically animals that are very smart. We have the same emotions as a dog, basically. They're a little bit more complicated because we're smart. But basically, the way our emotions work is about the same as a dog, so far as I can tell. A dog can feel happy and sad and excited and lonely, and so can people. The dog just doesn't have the more complicated emotions, but I think he would if he was smarter. And we still try to make ourselves happy in the same way a dog does. And the reason why we become insane, or maybe we're insane when we're born, is because we know how to imagine things that don't exist in order to satisfy our emotions. We want to feel like we have what we want rather than to actually have it. And that, I think, is the main point of the video. So actually, that is the end of the video then. I will stop it now.